Go.
So Anthony Abbott's fifth touchdown pass of the season helped account for all of Wareham's points in the game against Somerset Berkeley. The Blue Raiders outrushed the Vikings 327 to 168 in the game, and the Vikings were also stopped on a fourth down from the Blue Raiders 4 after an impressive 15-play drive in the third quarter while they were only trailing 20-7. So that was a key moment in that game. As far as Fairhaven goes, the Blue Devils, facing muddy conditions, they went away from their spread offense. Instead, they did a ground attack and had success. They knocked off previously undefeated Old Rochester. The Blue Devils rushed for 273 yards on 44 carries. Billy Pyers led the way with 136 yards on 12 carries, while Kobe Edwards had 89 yards on 11 carries for his second straight 3-touchdown performance. Pyers also found this end zone, like I said earlier, on a 70-yard scamper with less than a minute into the game. And the Blue Devils scored on their first 3 offensive possessions to take a 21-0 lead into halftime, and they never really looked back. I know they did end up giving up, some points to Old Rochester. They didn't get the shutout. There was that Richie Phillips ended up picking up a fumble on a 2-point conversion attempt and returned it for 2 points, and then he also scored. So they didn't get the shutout, but it was a, kind of an impressive performance on offense and on defense, going against, previously undefeated Old Rochester team. And really, even though Wareham is coming off the loss to Somerset Berkeley, I mean, this is one of those teams that, a program schedules hoping to get better for their conference. It's a non-league game for the Vikings. So really, when you look at it like that, yeah, they're not undefeated anymore, but at least they got to play tough competition, and that should have them ready for the Blue Devils this week. So,
sure. And I don't know, you probably didn't realize this because you were talking, but while you were talking, we had a special guest appearance in the background of legendary editor Ken Hartnett.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Who making his first appearance on the show. Ken, nice. Of course, covered the Green Bay Packers in the Vince Lombardi days, so we could someday do an entire podcast with him just talking about that. He's got some great stories. But this is going to be like one of those, Super Bowl I type games, because you've got 2 smash mouth teams here, 2 teams that are going to go after each other pretty well. Big physical teams, too. Yeah,
and, I was at the game last year, and I know Wareham ended up winning that game, and there was a lot of turnovers Fairhaven had. But I remember sitting there at Wareham saying to myself, wow, this Fairhaven team is a lot better than last year. They're going to be good. And, that year, now that year is now. So I think it's interesting, too. We're going to talk about the ground attack, but, Anthony Abbott has had a great season passing the ball, and then if you look at Fairhaven, they have Jared Antill and Christian Braga. Those 2 guys can pass the ball. So who knows? This, both teams could have 150 yards passing each, it'll be exciting to see, who wins this game. And I'm gonna turn to Twitter probably Wednesday of this week. I know we started doing it last week, asking people, for their scores or their picks for the games. So I'm gonna turn to you guys and see, who you think is gonna win this game, and maybe that'll help me determine who I think is gonna win this game. Because right now I have no clue. Right. It's only Monday, so you can sway me one way or the other. How about that?
Tweet Laurie at SC_varsity. Let her know your pick for the game. I'm going to say it's going to be Wareham by a defensive touchdown.
Okay.
That's my guess. That's a 7 o'clock game?
Yes, 7 o'clock.
Wareham at Fairhaven, because there are no mosquitoes in
Fairhaven. No mosquitoes in Fairhaven, not at all.
Allowed.
Nope.
They cannot cross the Pope's Island Bridge there, and they have to stand. They're all standing there at the Mattapoisett line, like just waiting.
Yes.
So, all right. Our next game that we'll talk about is Bourne at Apponequet. That's going to be a 4 o'clock game on Friday. And this is going to be a battle for the Lakers.
It should be. I know a lot of people coming into the season said, Bourne, the defending SEC champs, Super Bowl champs, graduated everybody and their mother pretty much. Like, they have a whole new team back.
They're still putting up points, though.
They are. And, they're 3-1 overall, and they're 3-0 in the South Coast Conference. So, really, Bourne is, defending their title well in the early going of the season. And I know last week, Apponequet, the Lakers picked up their first South Coast Conference win, which I know Coach Bob Lomp must be excited about that, after losing to Wareham the week before. Went to Seekonk and did not have his starting quarterback, Cam Costa. He was out with a concussion that he suffered late in that Wareham game. And really, the Lakers, they didn't need to throw the ball. I know the weather was really bad on Friday, so they just went to what they do best, and that's a ground attack. Matt Michael, once again, was impressive. He had 25 carries for 117 yards, and he had 2 touchdowns. And as a team, the Lakers racked up 219 yards on 49 carries. So right there, when you're rushing the ball 49 times, that tells you kind of what the bread and butter is for Apponequet. And filling in for Costa was backup offensive lineman Corey Holmes. He did a solid job filling in. He didn't have to pass the ball a lot. Basically, he just had to hand the ball off, and he did a solid job in that. From what I hear, Cam Costa should be back this week. At least that's what Bob Lomp was hoping from last week. And I think it's going to come down to if Apponequet can control the clock and keep Bourne off the field, it could be a Lakers win, but it's going to be tough. Bourne's won 3 straight games by a combined score of 88-33. The backfield duo of Chad Marsh and Marquise Rhodes, those 2 guys have gotten it done. Last week, Marsh had 16 carries for 160 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Marquise Rhodes had 14 carries for 128 yards and 1 touchdown. And that was against Case in a SEC win. And so far this season, Marsh has scored 10 of Bourne's 14 touchdowns, with all 10 of them coming on the ground. So really, if Apponequet can key in and stop Marsh and, either keep him off the field or keep him in check, the Lakers have a shot. But it will be a little challenging for Apponequet this week, even though they are at home. Because Bourne, they're on a roll. They've won 3 straight. They're getting it done on the ground. They're controlling the clock. They're, controlling the game pretty much. The upside for Apponequet is, they saw last week with Alex Pimentel that they have a kicking game now. A 36-yard field goal for a high school kid is pretty
That's
good.
Very good.
So you never know in these close games if that could really, lead to a victory.
Of course, it's easy. You find a kicking game when you actually kick.
Yeah, and they not to say they necessarily needed it, but last week they beat Seekonk 15-7. So you subtract those 3 points, it's 12-7. That's a lot closer than you really want when you're playing basically a monsoon and the ball's slippery and it's popping out, and so I know
in those conditions to make a field goal of that length is extra impressive.
Yeah, because I was at the Voc Tech game against Stang on Friday, and even though they have the turf, it was still wet, and Justin Soares went for, I want to say it was like a 30 or 40-yard field goal, something like, I can't remember exact distance now, but it was on target, but it was just a little bit short. But they still went. What
was the name of the Apponequet kid that kicked it?
Alex Pimentel.
All right, so Bill Belichick, if you're watching, pick up Alex Pimentel because your kicker's not getting it done. So
hey, my Redskins, we could use him too. Him or Justin Soares, one of those kids, because we did not do very good in our kicking game.
So that is Bourne at Apponequet, 4 p.m. on Friday. Another Friday game is Greater New Bedford Voc Tech at Seekonk. That's a 7 o'clock game. And Voc Tech, looking better last week? Yeah,
I picked Stang to win that game last week, and for a few different reasons. One, I thought Corey Pont was going to be out, and I felt like Stang, had some momentum, even though they had lost to East Bridgewater the week before.
And also, she sits near John Darling in the newsroom.
Yeah, Spartan Village. I'm always hearing about Spartan Village, and Stang. I know Stang is going to get a win. I just don't know when. But really, Voc Tech, impressed me. This was the first time I'd seen the Bears play this season, and Corey Pont was back from his separated shoulder. Separated shoulder, so he's going to feel it all season. But he was back. He had 10 carries for, I think it was 45 yards. But really, it wasn't him. It was nice having him there. He had a presence. He got some of the attention of the defense. But Trevor Menia, he just took over. This kid, he broke some big runs. He even had some big runs called back, on holding, where he could have had more yards, but he ended up having 114 yards on 9 carries and a touchdown. And really, he set the tone for Voc Tech in a game where the Bears turned over the ball 2 times in the first half and still led at halftime, 7-0. And, the defense played strong. Like I was saying earlier, Derek Lewis had a big turnover that he caused for Stang. And the Spartans really never got going, and I think a lot of that had to do with Voc Tech's defense. And it was, rainy game. there wasn't a lot of passing going on. The Bears rushed for 200 yards, and really the defense held Stang to 43 yards in the first half, and like I said, 142 for the game. But, Stang finally got going in that fourth quarter and, put together a nice long drive, but took over 9 minutes off the clock. And that kept Voc off the field, but at the same time, Voc Tech had over 200 yards rushing in the game. So I think the offense is back for Voc Tech. Seekonk has lost all 4 of its games this season by a combined score of 93-91. Mike Ludi, he scored 2 of Seekonk's 4 touchdowns this season. Last week against Apponequet, quarterback Ben Sawyer connected with Jordan Nicholas for a 35-yard scoring strike, and that was Seekonk's lone score in that game. So this is a team that I really think Voc Tech can beat, even though they are going on the road to Seekonk. And Coach Chuck Allaire said to me, after the game last week, we're going to see Seekonk next week. We haven't beaten them in 5 or 6 years. We're hoping to change that. He's like, can you pick us to win this week? And I said, sure. I said, you know what? I said, I think I can do that. I said, I have confidence in you guys. So it's a game that I think. Because
you wanted to give Seekonk some bulletin board material.
Hey, I think, because I said to him, I said, I picked against you guys this week. And he said, well, don't do that next week. We're hoping to beat Seekonk. So I will be rooting for the Bears this week. So
as will I. All right. So that is Greater New Bedford Voc Tech at Seekonk, 7 p.m. on Friday. Another 4 o'clock game on Friday is Case at Old Rochester, and the Bulldogs stumbled a bit last week.
Yep. I know, everyone had been kind of surprised with how Old Rochester was doing this season. Even Coach Henry Quinlan, when I talked to him last week for the preview for that game, he's like, we're a young team. We're not setting any expectations, because usually when we set expectations, we fall short of them. So we're just living in that moment. And I know against Fairhaven, they just really didn't have an answer for the Blue Devils on the ground. Like I said earlier, they had over 250 rushing yards. They had some big plays. They ended up allowing, I think it was 273 yards on the ground to the Blue Devils. And Old Rochester trailed 21-0 at the half. It was a rainy night. When you're down by that many points, it's tough to kind of come out of that hole. Maybe if the weather wasn't as bad, they would have had a better opportunity. The Bulldogs' lone touchdown came on a 4-yard run by Richie Phillips. He also scored 2 points when he recovered the fumble on the 2-point attempt for Fairhaven and returned it 99 yards. I know Buddy was pretty impressed with the return, how he managed to stay on his feet, 99 yards in the pouring rain and muddy field. But I think the key for Old Rochester this week is coming out and establishing themselves early against a Case team that struggled this year. Case is 1-3, 0-3 in the South Coast Conference. They managed just to score 1 touchdown in each of their last 3 games, all losses. And that's come from Taylor Furtado. He's had 2 of those touchdowns in the last 3 weeks, and they were both on rushes. So they even though they have what many people consider as the top quarterback in the South Coast Conference, he's not really getting the job done through the air. It's more on the ground. And in their 3 losses this year, Case has had trouble stopping the rushing attack of Wareham, Dighton, Rehoboth, and Bourne. Those 3 teams have combined for 8 rushing touchdowns. So I think this is a week where Old Rochester's option offense can really get going against a Case defense that has had trouble stopping that run. And if they can get a touchdown on the board early, maybe they can forget about the Fairhaven loss. And if you look at it, if they win this game, they're 2-1 in the conference. And if, let's say, Fairhaven ends up beating Wareham, they're 2-1, and then Wareham's 2-1. I mean, that's why we play these games, is because 1 week or 2 weeks, things can change. A lot of things can change in just a short amount of time. And
from week to week, I mean, every game you're putting your season in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
So that is Case at Old Rochester at 4 o'clock. Another Friday game is Dighton Rehoboth at Bishop Stang at 7 p.m. And this is going to be a tough test for the Spartans for sure.
Yeah. Stang came out last week and really just struggled against Voc Tech in that game. Bishop Stang's offense really couldn't get anything going in that first half. I think only had, 45 yards in the first half, finished with 142. They had 2 turnovers that they forced, from Voc Tech. They weren't able to capitalize on either one of them. And the big problem, from my point of view, is it seems like Charlie McKeeman is everything, for them at this point. I mean, I know Mike Pratt is, trying to get things going on the offense, but he only has one person to really feed the ball to because Luke Save is out with an abdominal I can't even say it. Abdominal strain, and we don't know when he's going to be back. So I think the key really for Stang to turn things around is to get that, another person, another player to step up and give Charlie a break, out of the backfield and kind of have that 1-2 punch, which that's what they would have had if, Luke wasn't, injured. And really that's what you need. I mean, when you look at all the teams in the area, there's not just one person that carries all the load. And I mean, even though it was just mostly Charlie, against Voc Tech, he still led the way. He had 20 carries for 73 yards. He was kept out of the end zone for the first time this season, but 20 carries, 73 yards. He's working hard for pretty much all of those yards. The bright side for Stang was the Spartans did put together a 23-play, 70-yard drive that got all the way down to the Voc Tech 2-yard line, but the Spartans weren't able to score. And the big problem with that drive, even though it was, they moved the ball, they moved the chains, the offense was finally going, was that they let most of the time, go off the clock. They didn't call any timeouts. I think they used about 9.5 minutes out of a 10-minute fourth quarter. They were down by 2 scores. It was one of those situations where, it was good that they were able to move the ball, but you got to pick up the pace a little bit, if you want to try and win the football game. I mean, you had 4 timeouts and they didn't call any of the timeouts, and, they're on a potential scoring drive. I know I talked to Ryan Sylvia after the game, and he said, we kept just hoping we're waiting for a big play to pop, and it didn't, but they did end up, getting all the way down to the 2, which, was good, but they're going to have to do more than that this week against Dighton Rehoboth. The Falcons are actually coming off a bye week after the opening the season with a shutout loss to Somerset Berkeley. Dighton Rehoboth has won 2 straight South Coast Conference games. 2 weeks ago, the Falcons were led by Mike Mello, who recorded 2 rushing touchdowns in a win against Case. And also in that game, Zach Reed hit a 18-yard field goal. And DR has only given up 1 touchdown in its past 2 games, and that was to Case quarterback Taylor Furtado. So, I mean, Dighton Rehoboth, every year it seems like, the Falcons are good. Even if they graduate a bunch of kids.
Yeah, this is a rebuilding year for them, right?
Yeah, this is a rebuilding year, and they're,
Doesn't happen.
2-1, 2-0 in the South Coast Conference. And this is a non-conference game for both teams, so it's, I mean, hopefully it'll make Stang a little bit better, and hopefully, they can kind of build off that last drive of, last week's game. But they got to be quicker, and they really have to find another guy to come in and, fill that void and, take off a little bit of the load from Charlie. So
that is Dighton Rehoboth at Bishop Stang at 7 o'clock. Local.
Actually, that's a 3:45.
3:45 has been changed. Okay, well then there you go, because SEC fans, it's your chance to see DR without having to travel too far.
Yep.
If you want to get a chance, you'll be out by 7 o'clock to see the Fairhaven Wareham.
Yeah,
game.
That's what I was just going to say.
Yeah. I'm sure the
great minds think alike.
The Wareham coaching staff will be at that game, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So then at 4 o'clock then is Dartmouth at Somerset?
Yeah. Yes, that is correct. That is correct.
Changing time, so we want to make sure. All right, so Dartmouth at Somerset.
Well, that was originally, I think that was originally a Saturday game, and then it got moved to Friday, and then it was 7 o'clock, and then it got moved to 3:30, and the last time I checked, it was 4 o'clock.
Okay.
So
may change again.
It may change again. Who knows? But
follow us on Twitter at SC_varsity.
Now this is definitely an interesting game because it's another non-conference game for the Indians, who have lost 3 straight non-conference games or non-league games. And Somerset Berkeley, I mean, it's one of the teams in the area that's doing well this year. I mean, I know that they were pretty solid last year, but really Dartmouth, not all they care about, but they're getting ready for the Old Colony League schedule. The Barnstable game, Bridgewater Raynham game. I mean, that's what really counts as far as making the playoffs. And playing teams like Somerset Berkeley, like King Philip last week, I mean, I think BC High too. I mean, you have to play these tough opponents to get better. And, Dartmouth's going through some growing pains after graduating a lot of kids. And I know Tim Smith has moved over at quarterback, and, he's learning that position. He's been a running back at the end of last season and the beginning of this season. He did score Dartmouth's lone touchdown last week in the loss to King Philip. It was a 1-yard run. And Mitch Laranger had a 44-yard run that set up that touchdown. But really, Dartmouth is struggling on the defensive end as well. They had trouble stopping King Philip's Joe Johnston, who rushed 175 yards for 23 carries, including a 77-yard touchdown run. And really, we kind of thought Dartmouth would be the team that has the big plays. They haven't been able to break too many big plays themselves on offense, and they've had trouble stopping, the opposing team, from having some big plays. And really last week, Dartmouth's offense struggled again. Even though the Indians weren't shut out like they were the week before, they were outgained 268 to 146. But Loranger, he was a bright spot. He did have 77 rushing yards on 7 carries, so about 11 yards a carry. But really, Somerset Berkeley, is kind of, like as I was saying earlier, the EAC, it's them and pretty much Fian, kind of probably going to be going at it. I wouldn't be surprised if Somerset Berkeley does win the EAC. And Dartmouth, it's going to take a lot for Dartmouth to, compete in that Old Colony League. So playing Somerset Berkeley is only going to help the Indians, get ready to face Barnstable, who knocked off Everett, and face Bridgewater Raynham, who beat, New Bedford 42-14 last week. And last week, I know it was a challenge for Somerset Berkeley. They were behind, 7-0 and 7-6 to Wareham. But in the second half, they came out and scored, I think it was 28 straight points. Garrett Carlos and Mike Grant, those two guys combined for 279 rushing yards. And in their first 4 games, Somerset Berkeley has outscored their opponents 147-29. So this is a team that's scoring a good amount of points and not allowing their opponents to score much. And this game against Wareham for Somerset Berkeley, that was the first time they had trailed in a game this season, and it was the first time they had allowed 2 touchdowns in a game. So, I mean, you can kind of see that, maybe there is an opportunity for Dartmouth, but, Somerset Berkeley is the real deal, and I feel like this is one of those games that, if Dartmouth beats them, that's going to be a huge step, It
just follows my saying that I always have, heed the hyphen. Because whenever you have a team that's, 2 towns with a hyphen in the middle, they're always tough. And that's going to be the case Friday at 4 o'clock, we're pretty sure.
Yes.
For Dartmouth at Somerset. 6 o'clock.
Yes, 6 o'clock
6
is correct.
6 o'clock for New Bedford.
New Bedford is at Barnstable, 6 o'clock.
All right.
Yes, that is correct.
Because mosquitoes can't go over the bridge.
No,
All right,
I guess not.
So New Bedford at Barnstable, 6 p.m. on Friday. And boy, is this going to be a difficult game.
Barnstable's, a team that, I think a lot of people looked at and said, okay, they're going to be good this year. Maybe not great like they've been in years past because they graduated their quarterback. But this kid, Peabody, he is just an unbelievable kid. He's basically taken over for Crook, who had been there for a long time and has, basically was known in the area as one of the area's top quarterbacks. And to beat and pretty much unseat Everett, a team who I would say the last 2 years has been number 1 in the state by, ESPN Boston, the Boston Globe.
At least top 3 or 4 every year.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And for them to go in there and beat them in double overtime, in the conditions that they had last week, that was impressive, And New Bedford, the Whalers, I think they're kind of going through an identity crisis right now. They opened the season with the 3 straight wins, and then they've lost 2 straight, to non-league teams. And last week, it just didn't really get much better. They fell behind 28-0 against, a tough Bridgewater Raynham team. And both of their touchdowns were scored in the second half. One came on a Mike LaJoy rush, and the other was a Mike Raposa pass to Kevin Nunes. So it's kind of the same names that you hear week in and week out. But really, New Bedford's offense needs to get more done. I know they just had 50 rushing yards, and you need to have more rushing yards than that to keep teams like Bridgewater Raynham, Duxbury, Barnstable. You need to keep those offenses off the field, and sometimes the best way to do that is, to have your offense do well. And Mike Raposa, he is getting the job done through the year. He had 16 passes for 149 yards. But I think establishing that ground attack is key for New Bedford and really, kind of limiting the other team's, rushing attack. I know last week Bridgewater Raynham's Brandon Gallagher had 3 first-half touchdowns, and that helped them get, the Trojans get out to a big lead. And it's going to be tough for New Bedford to beat the Red Raiders. Nick Peabody, like I was saying earlier, he had the touchdown pass, an 8-yard strike to Dylan Morris in the second overtime that sealed the win for Barnstable. And it was the second time the two had connected for a touchdown pass in the game. The first was a 37-yard strike. And the game was tied 7-7 after regulation. Barnstable missed a field goal attempt on its first overtime try. Everett was stopped on its first attempt, and then Peabody ended up getting the touchdown pass. And then the Red Raiders intercepted, the final attempt from Everett to seal the victory. So it was an exciting game. The Red Raiders have proven once again that they are one of those top teams, not just in the area, but I would say in the state. They've outscored their first 4 opponents 158-41, and I think they've earned a lot of respect by beating, a team like Everett that year in and year out is one of the best in the state, not just, locally, but in the state. So it's a tall order for the Whalers this week, but I think we've been saying that every week. Last week
they have a very, very tough schedule.
Bridgewater Raynham, then they played, Duxbury before that. I mean, it just seems like every week, New Bedford is up against this tough challenge, which, it only bodes well, once they do get to the Brockton game. Because really, like I was saying with Dartmouth, the big games that count for New Bedford are the Brockton and Durfee.
Right. So that's a good strategy because you're going up against some of these top teams that you might see in the playoffs, and then you've only got to worry about beating 2 other teams in the Big Three to be able to make it there. So you're getting a taste of the teams that'll both help you beat those Big Three teams, and you'll also have a leg up when it comes to playoff time.
But you just can't. I think the big issue, with facing some of these tough teams and losing, kind of, lopsided, is not getting down. Is not, saying, wow, we just got beat, 2 straight weeks, 42-14, for New Bedford, and being like, wow, are we ever going to be able to turn around? Yes, you will be able to turn around. Just don't, get down on yourselves and
no way Coach Golden will let that happen.
No. So I know that maybe this week will be a turning point. Who knows? Last year New Bedford beat Barnstable 31-17. So, they beat them by 2 touchdowns last year. So who knows? Yeah. You never know what happens on a Friday night.
Absolutely.
Or a Friday afternoon. Or
in early evening, 6 p.m. game, New Bedford at Barnstable. And then our last game that we're going to talk about is Saturday's game, Old Colony at Bishop Connolly, and that's going to be a 1 o'clock game on Saturday, and so no one need to worry about mosquitoes then.
Nope.
And I drove by Old Colony on Saturday. Were they home this past Saturday?
Yes.
Okay.
You should have stopped in.
Well, it was probably right before game time. Not a single car.
Really?
Really. I don't know if everybody just goes early and tailgates or something, but I didn't see any cars on the road, but then again, I never see any cars on that road anyway.
Yeah.
Now, horse and buggies, they were all over the place out there.
Well, I know every time it seems like I go to Old Colony, it's always raining. Like once I get on that one road where it takes you to Old Colony,
it's like
it just starts drizzling, and then my phone, I usually lose reception on my phone, and then
all of a sudden that scary horror music.
Yeah, it's like
it's
the making of a horror movie. Well, I know Old Colony, is kind of put the fright in some of its opponents this year. Nice. You like that segue there. Last week, Old Colony beat New Mission 35-16, and second straight win for the Krugers. I know I keep getting tweets. This is our year. All the kids from the Old Colony keep saying, and really, it was an impressive game for Old Colony. They were down 8-0 early in the second quarter. But from then on, it was all Old Colony, scoring 35 unanswered points over the next 3 quarters to basically blow the game open. As I was saying earlier, Jake Pringle had a huge game. He completed 15 of 23 passes, 236 yards, and 2 touchdown passes. He also had 2 rushing touchdowns in the win, and he threw to 6 different receivers in the game. So, he used his arms, he used his legs. This kid was everywhere on the field for Old Colony, and that's why he was our player of the week. Once again, Kevin Blaze, he also led the rushing attack, carried the ball 14 times, 136 yards, and he had a touchdown catch. Brett Aguiar, he picked off a pass on defense, and he recorded a 14-yard touchdown pass. The Krugers have won 2 straight games by a combined score of 75-24. Usually we're sitting here saying, Colony's struggling to get points on the board. This year, the Krugers have learned how to score, and they've also learned how to stop the opposition, which can it's only going to mean good things facing a Bishop Connolly team that beat Old Colony last year 34 to 26. And the cool thing about this matchup, it has nothing to do with what's going on the field, but both teams are named the Krugers. It's always fun when you either cover that game or you write about it because you're like, oh, I can't use Krugers or the home crew, and I mean, even though Old Colony is in the Mayflower Small and Bishop Connolly's in the Mayflower Large, I really think the Krugers do have, a shot to put a scare in, the host Krugers this week, just because I feel like the confidence is so high at Old Colony. Bishop Connolly, they have outscored, their opposition. They're in the first 3 weeks, 76-8. So their defense is a little bit more impressive than Old Colony's. But here's two teams that, they can put points on the board. I think it might come down to whose defense can make the plays. And their lone loss this year for Bishop Connolly came against Nantucket in week 3, and it was 34-13. So it's a team that, we always kind of say Nantucket, Nantucket's always strong. So we'll see how Old Colony matches up and really takes the momentum of these 2 wins, into an important game for them, even though it is a small against large school competition. So.
All right, well, we'll give you the rundown one more time. The 4 o'clock games on Friday: Case at Old Rochester, Dartmouth at Somerset, Bourne at Apponequet, and then I know one of those 7 o'clock games was changed, right?
Yes, it was the Dighton Rehoboth at
Bishop Stang.
Yep,
okay.
that's
3:45.
Yep, 3:45.
All right, then we have New Bedford at Barnstable at 6 o'clock. Then we have Wareham at Fairhaven at 7, and Greater New Bedford Voc Tech at Seekonk at 7.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And then Saturday, Old Colony at Bishop Connolly, 1 p.m. Yep. So just follow along with us on Twitter at SC_varsity. Like us on Facebook, SouthCoastVarsity.com on Facebook, and get a hold of us any way you can. Share with us your pictures, your videos, your thoughts during the games, your picks, everything. This is your show. We wanted to be interactive, and I have a little bit of fun on Friday nights. I have to sit in the office, but I have a little bit of fun watching the interactions on Twitter now that Laurie taught me how to see them.
Yeah, he didn't know how to see them, and I'm like, I know something more than you do.
See, that's the thing is I've had a Twitter account for years, but like I do it on my phone, so I get like little messages, like little notifications when somebody tweets. So I didn't know how to actually do it on the computer, but now I do.
Well, I just learned something myself last week for Twitter. Is I wasn't sure how to hashtag, and I know what it is, but I wasn't sure like why you do it. And then Andrew Tornetta was like, "Oh yeah, if you're gonna ask people, who they think's gonna win the game, you should have them hashtag like Blue Devil, hashtag Blue Devils or hashtag Vikings." And I'm like, "Oh," and then he's like, "Then you can like." Search that and see all the responses, and I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. So we had a good amount of people respond to our questions for those games, and I will be asking them again this week. So follow us on Twitter at SC_varsity. Give us what your thoughts are.
And we're so close to 1,000, right?
We are. I think it's 877 as of Monday.
We should be over 1,000 by next week. Let's hope.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Right. Well, that about does it for this week's show. We'll be back next week to look at the week that was and the week that will be. So until then, we will see you under the lights.
And in the end zone.